Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you for joining this Asia-Pacific GPP Network webinar session on the green public procurement of energy-efficient cooling appliances, hosted by KEITI and UNEP. My name is Sophie Loueyraud, and I am a consultant working in the Sustainable Public Procurement team at UNEP. In the course of today's webinar, we will first start with a presentation on the recently released GPP Guidelines for energy-efficient cooling appliances, a presentation which will be given by my colleagues Soledad Garcia and Miquel Pitarch Mocholi from the United for Efficiency initiative. We will then continue with two different case studies on the development of GPP criteria for air conditioners in India, which will be presented by Ms. Nidhi Gupta, who is an Associate Director at Environmental Design Solutions, and Ms. Apurva Chaturvedi, who is a Senior Clean Energy Specialist at USAID. We will then have a third presentation on enhancing the uptake of green cooling technologies in Thailand by Ms. Denise Andres from GIZ's Green Cooling Initiative. We'll then have, after those three presentations, a questions and answer session. And I invite you to please send out your questions through the chat. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and that the recording will be available along with the presentations on the Asia Pacific GPP Network homepage and on our YouTube channel a few days after the webinar. Simultaneous interpretation in Bahasa is also kindly provided by our GIZ colleagues by clicking on the link displayed on the screen, which we also will share with you through the chat. Now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleagues from the United for Efficiency initiative. I see that my colleague Soledad has joined.
Yes, thank you so
Soledad,
much.
the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Good afternoon to everyone. And thank you so much for joining this webinar today. So, as Sophie mentioned, my name is Soledad Garcia. I'm part of the United for Efficiency team. I'm project coordinator of some of the projects within U4E portfolio. And before jumping to the specific SPP topic, I would like to give a quick presentation on U4E initiative for those that might not know us. So just a second, I'll show my presentation. There. Okay, I trust you can see my screen.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, there. Okay, so for those that may not know about G4E, United for Efficiency, it's a global initiative led by UN Environment, funded by the Global Environment Facility and supported by a wide range of leading global companies and organizations. We provide independent and tailored technical support to countries to accelerate the transformation the transformation of their markets to more energy efficient lighting, appliances, and equipment to obtain substantial financial and CO2 emission savings. So we focus on 5 products: lighting, refrigerators, air conditioners, electric motors, and distribution transformers, which together consume more than 50% of global electricity. We fulfill this mission through what we call the integrated policy approach, which encompasses these 5 areas that you can see here on screen. Standards and regulation, better known as the minimum energy performance standards or the MAPs, supporting policies, which includes labeling schemes and communication campaigns, monitoring, verification, and enforcement, financial mechanisms, and environmental zone management. This graph may be helpful to show more clearly how all these topics relate one another. So let's say in a typical market, which is unregulated, there's a variety of products that are available for sale. And of course, there's going to be some products that are going to be worse performing or less energy efficient than others. So we start with the development of the update of the maps to ban the inefficient products from entering the market. Afterwards, the consumers to differentiate between the different products and to choose the ones that are more efficient. We promote and promote, of course, the most energy efficiency one. We develop what is a labeling scheme to provide this information. Energy efficiency products are usually more pricey as well, and therefore we develop different financial mechanisms and incentives with local banks and international financial institutions to bridge the price gap and to make them more affordable for the end user. It doesn't make sense to have maps in place if there's not going to be an MVE system, monitoring, verification, and enforcement system in place that oversees the market and ensures the maps compliance. So this area, what it includes is working with laboratories and testing facilities on the testing standards, the methodologies, working with custom controls, different tools and resources like a product registration system, custom codes, and so on. Last but not least, environmental zone management for the proper recollection and final disposal of all these products, obsolete products that we're taking out of the market, and that usually contain hazardous materials like mercury, refrigerant gases, foams, etc. So as I mentioned before, we work along with a wide range of partners from the industrial sector, like the main global manufacturers and industrial associations, to technical organizations and regional government institutions. And of course, donors and implementing agencies, also from the UN family. Well, this is a map with the national projects we are currently implementing. So as you can see, we are present in all the world with different products, with different projects on the 5 products. U4E provides support at different levels. At the national level, with what is the development of national strategies, national trainings for policymakers, project development, and fundraising support. At the regional level, with regional market assessments, capacity buildings, and regional harmonization projects. And at the global, with a wide range of tools and resources which are available for policymakers. These are some of the tools that we have already available, from the country setting assessment for more than 155 countries to procurement guidelines and financial mechanisms guide, policy guides, model regulation guidelines, and other supporting guidelines. We know that SPP practices have the ability to greatly support this market transformation process from any country by implementing more stringent performance levels and eco-design requirements in their public purchases. This, of course, translates to more energy and financial savings from state and semi-state entities, and also reduces their environmental footprint. But in addition, it stimulates the private sector and fosters the consumer's behavior change by setting the example. So currently, SPP is not sufficiently embedded in sectoral policies, and therefore U4E has developed a new series of guidelines to provide a set of technical specifications and recommendations to develop the requirements for procuring higher energy efficient alternatives. These are intended for public procurers, lighting and cooling technical personnel, policymakers, and officers. The scope of the guidelines includes lighting for office and large building lighting, refrigerator appliances, the domestic, but also the commercial, professional type vending machines, laboratory grade refrigerators, and room air conditioners, portables, split air, etc. And about this too, it's what my colleague Miquel is going to talk in a minute. We have additional resources that complement this guideline, such as the toolkit with key recommendations on environmental, social, and economic aspects, overall recommendations on the tendering process, and an SPP Excel spreadsheet tool, which compares the different bids, so policymakers can make a choice whether which option is more suitable, which option complies better with the SPP recommendations from the guidelines. And my colleague Miquel will explain this in a minute. So before handing to Miquel, I would like to very briefly show this the figures. As you can see in this graph, this is the projection of the total electricity consumption for the 28 countries of the Asia-Pacific region from 2020 to 2040. So as you can see here, we have 3 scenarios, which is the business as usual, meaning everything stays as we know it today. Second blue line, which is the minimum ambition scenario. This refers to the maps. And now green line, which is the high ambition scenario, which refers to more ambitious levels, a more ambitious regulation, which would match the SPP context. So as you can see, if countries implement minimum energy performance standards, they can reach 400, almost 500 terawatts hour of annual savings in 2040, which is equivalent to 225 power stations, 500 million tons of CO2, and 42 billion USD dollars in the electricity bill. Of course, in the cumulative aspect, and this is on regards the high ambition scenario, in those 20 years, it could be attained more than 11,000 terawatt hours of electricity savings. Something very important from the previous slide is the difference on the projection of the consumption. In a scenario where policies are applied, the increase of the electricity consumption that is expected in over 132% could be reduced to 87%. And it could be even less, even half, if more stringent policies are implemented. Okay, so I won't take any more time, and I will pass to my colleague Miquel, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Soledad. Just I will share my screen so I can pass my own slides. So hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so in order to have a successful green public procurement program, we need a cohesive model where we consider the legislative framework, the financing and acquisition models, the green requirements for the product. That's what we are going to see here today. And also, of course, other additional factors such as social benefit. When we are defining the requirements for the product, for the green public procurement, there are always several questions that arise, such as which is the product scope I should include, the end-of-life requirements, the energy efficiency requirements, environmental criteria, and so on. And that's what we try to solve with the U4E guidelines for green public procurement. As Sole commented, now we have 3 guidelines. These are the guidelines for cooling appliances. So we have one guideline for air conditioners and another one for refrigerators. In the case of refrigerators, we have domestic and commercial refrigerators. And in the case of air conditioners, we include several types of them, like single split or multi-split, and also the window type, for example. The content of the guidelines is usually related to energy efficiency, type and size, occupancy and temperature controls to save energy, refrigerant, sound power level, safety, reparability, and environmental sound management at the end of life of the product. For the cooling appliances, for the refrigerators, the aspects are similar to those in air conditioning, but we can include also other aspects such as food preservation, where, for example, we can have requirements on the temperature of the compartment. So we can reduce the food waste and food will last longer. Well, before going to the next slide, I would like to say that these guidelines, they are global guidelines, and there are some aspects that where they can be implemented directly by the buyer, but there are others that they are aimed to support the policymakers in order when they are preparing their own requirements for the country. So you will understand this better in the next example. For example, when we want to decide which is the minimum level of energy efficiency, we should ask in the green public procurement. It's not an easy question to solve for everyone because it depends a lot from country to country. It depends on the test standards they are using. It depends on the energy, how they calculate energy efficiency. For example, for those countries that are using the seasonal energy efficiency performance, they make their calculations based on the climate they have in their own country. For example, here we have 2 examples with 2 really different climates. The hot one, that is the orange one here, this is number of hours of use depending on the ambient temperature. And then we have a colder one, that is the blue one, where we have less hours of use of air conditioning and also at lower ambient temperatures. So when we calculate energy efficiency for these 2 different climates, we are going to get, for the same product, different energy efficiencies. So we cannot put the same level for both of them. In the guidelines, we have some recommendations for the high level efficiency for several climates, not only these 2, but other climates also. Here we can see the difference between these 2 climates. For example, for the cold one, the minimum level of efficiency, of high efficiency, is 7.9, and for the hot one is 5.9, and for the hot one, for the hot one is 5.9, and for the cold one is 7.9. So this doesn't mean that the 5.9 here is less efficient than 7.9 here. It's just that they are calculated in a different way. So that's why I say that we need a policymaker and an expert that see the guidelines and then choose the correct number for their country. Okay. Another way to implement or to set up minimum requirements for the energy efficiency is to look at the market. If we have information from the market, what we recommend is to target around 20% of the top efficient products that we have in the market. And we can use, if we have an energy efficiency label, then we can use the energy efficiency label in our country to help buyers to distinguish between these 20% top efficient products. But for that, as a policymakers, we have to say which levels of the efficiency label they can buy. So here we have an example of energy efficiency market share in the European Union. And this is the label from the European Union, and this is how it is expected to change during the years, this market share in efficiency. So A is the most efficient and F is the less efficient. And we see that over the years, more efficient products are entering into the market. Okay. So how we decide, how can we set up the minimum requirements for the green public procurement? So if we are targeting around 20% most efficient products, for 2021, we can target from A to D, because from A to D, we have around 26% of the products, okay? So that would be our requirement for 2021. But this requirement needs to be reviewed every year or every 2 years and see if we need to update this minimum requirement. So for example, in 2023, we could update it to C as a minimum level for green public procurement. And in 2025, we could update it again to B as minimum requirement. And then in 2028, we can update it to A as a minimum requirement, okay? Okay. Then there are other aspects that also have an impact on the energy consumption. That sometimes it is easy to set up a minimum requirement, a mandatory minimum requirement. Other times it's more like a recommendation. For example, we recommend that the system should not be oversized. And this is difficult to have a minimum requirement. It's something that an expert has to see, which is the optimum size of the system, right? Then, of course, we can improve efficiency of the building. We also talk in the guidelines about technology. For example, variable speed is usually more energy efficient than fixed speed. We talk about occupancy and temperature limiting controls. So if we know the schedule of the building, how it is used, the building, we can also optimize the use of air conditioner and save energy. And then we talk about reversible units. That means that for those countries that also need heating, we recommend when possible, because it's not always possible, but when possible, we also recommend reversible units because a heat pump uses 1/4 of energy compared to electrical resistance heater. Okay. Okay. Then we have requirements also for the refrigerant. In this case, of course, we have the refrigerant should have 0 ODP, the ozone depletion potential. And then regarding to the GWP, the greenhouse warming potential, it might depend on the size and the type of air conditioner, but usually we can ask as a maximum GWP of 750. So every air conditioner that has a GWP below 750 will be eligible for the green public procurement. In these three examples here, these are three common refrigerants that are used in air conditioning. The R410A will be not eligible for green public procurement because it has a GWP of 2088. Okay, and then we have these other two that will be eligible. And of course, if the R290, that is a natural refrigerant, is available, we recommend to use this one. But depending on the air conditioner, on the type of air conditioner and the size, this might not be available in the country. Okay. Okay, and then just to say also the importance about appropriate installation and maintenance by qualified technicians. So we reduce leaks of refrigerant and also maintain in the optimum performance the air conditioner. Okay, these requirements for the technicians can be included also in the bidding rules, for example. Okay. Okay. Then we have also requirements for product durability. For example, reparability. So we can have in the rules, or in the bidding rules, that suppliers should guarantee the supply of essential spare parts during the lifespan of the product. They might have also, or they should have access to repair and maintenance information also if needed. So these requirements, they are in some countries or economies, such as in Europe, they are already mandatory for all the products entering into the market. So if this is not the case in your country, for example, then this could be asked at least in the green public procurement, during the green public procurement. Then regarding to environmental zone management, that means at the end of life, that means minimizing the adverse effects that results from the end of life of the products, because many times we are replacing old products that we have already in our building. So how we have to do this during the bidding rules, okay? So this also depends from country to country, and for countries with an extended producer responsibility, that is the EPR scheme, and the management of these products is responsibility of the supplier of the product. Okay, so we have to verify that there are no exceptions, and the supplier is part of this EPR scheme, and all the products will be treated correctly at the end of life. In countries without EPR scheme, then the buyer is responsible for the treatment at the end of life of the product. But we should guarantee that there will be a proper treatment for these products. So what we can do, one of the things we can do, is to agree with the supplier an appropriate treatment. And for that, we recommend that we should include the conditions in the bidding rules also, because this treatment is not for free, and if it's not for free, we have to include it in the rules also. Okay. Then I want to talk about the Excel tool that Soledad also commented. We have developed a tool together with the guidelines, with the Green Public Procurement Guidelines, that they aim to compare different bids, so we can compare the life cycle cost, the life cycle emissions, and also we can compare with what we have in place. If we have something, if we have old products that are still working, for example, and we want to replace them, then we can also analyze this part here. And before jumping to the Excel tool, just to you to understand what the tool does and what it calculates, we have here the life cycle cost analysis, where we consider the initial cost, the running cost, of course, considering the consumption of electricity during the whole life of the product, also the end of life cost and the environmental cost. This environmental cost is a parameter that was added in order to have into consideration also the environmental issue. So, for example, we can add here a value in dollars by ton of CO2 emitted. So, in a single number, we have considered the cost and also the environmental issue. Okay, so now go to the tool here. I hope you can see the tool now. Okay, yes. So this is an Excel tool. We have different tabs. The first one is the introduction, where we explain a bit how to use the tool. Then we have the country input. In this tab, we have different parameters. For all the parameters, we have a default value, but the country can change all of these parameters. That between them, we have the price of electricity, we have the temperature distribution that we saw before in the country, so regarding to the climate of the country. Then we have the minimum level of efficiency, the annual leakage, and many other parameters. Okay. As I said before, these are global guidelines. If this is going to be used as an official tool for the country, we recommend that the policymaker, together with an expert, they decide which numbers should be here for the country, and then they might block this tab or at least part of the parameters, so a normal user cannot change these parameters. Okay. Okay. And then we have the cost and emissions tab, where we can compare between different bids. So all the yellow cells are the ones where we have to introduce data, and the other cells are the ones where the tool is calculating things. Okay, so I put here an example between bid number 1 and bid number 2. Here we have to introduce the bid code, then the number of units, the capacity of the unit, the energy efficiency. Then here it appears the minimum energy efficiency, and if it says this is the requirement, the minimum energy efficiency requirement for the green public procurement. Then this says if it passes or not. So in this case, both are passing the minimum requirement. Then here we introduce the energy consumption. If it has also special controls to produce energy consumption, the percentage of savings we expect from these controls, sorry. Then the GWP for the refrigerant, the charge of refrigerant in kilos. Then here it says if it passes or not the minimum requirement. In this case, both are passing the minimum requirement. And then we have the price, or the price of the bid. So for the first one, we have $100,000, and for the second one, we have $80,000. But the second one is cheaper, but it has a higher energy consumption, okay, than the first one. So then we make the calculations here, several different calculations. If we look at the total life cycle cost here, we see that the first bid, it has a cost at the end of life of $487,000, and the second one is around $600,000. So even though it was $20,000 more expensive, the bid, we are saving at the end of life more than $100,000 with the first bid because it's more efficient. And then we can see also in the last column here, we can see also the total emissions, the indirect from the electricity and the direct from the refrigerant altogether. And we see that the bid one also is avoiding around 300,000 kilos of CO2. Okay. Okay, and then finally, we can, as I said, we can compare also with the old appliances. So here in the bottom, we can here introduce the data for the old appliances that we have in place. And here in the first column, we introduce the bid code of the bid that we want to compare with the old appliances. And then here it calculates the payback period for the cost, the payback period for the emissions, and also the balance cost and the balance emissions between the bid with the new appliances and the old appliances that we have in place. So I think I am running out of time, so I will stop here. And thank you very much. If there are any questions, I will try to solve it at the end of the webinar. Just to say that in the presentation, we have also the link where you can access to the U4E guidelines and other documents that we have in our website. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miquel and Soledad, especially as I know that it is quite early for you in Latin America. And I also wanted to mention that all the U4E tools and publications are available on the webpage that I shared with you through the chat. And we will now continue with our next presenters. And I will invite Ms. Apurva Chaturvedi from USAID to please take the floor. Ms. Chaturvedi, can you please unmute yourself?
Sorry. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to UNEP for organizing this today's workshop and we would like to definitely present our insights and experience on development of green public procurement criteria for room air conditioners in India, a initiative that we actually partnered with UNEP in India, and we are very happy that it really went a long way in terms of certain tangible outputs. Next slide, Nidhi. So as you can see, cooling has emerged as one of the major challenges that the world is facing. And the reason for that is the global temperatures are rising, more people are migrating to the cities, there is a rapid urbanization, and also people have now disposable income at their ends where they can now afford air conditioners to give them the comfort that they require. And if we look at the entire annual GHG emissions, uh, cooling is actually responsible for almost 10% of the annual GHG emissions. And if you look at the combined statistics of the entire air travel and the ocean shipping, this is more than that. Space cooling particularly represents also a significant proportion of the overall GHG emissions. In fact, 50% of energy consumption in office buildings is due to air conditioners. So air conditioning and cooling is a major energy guzzler, and therefore cooling is one of the major challenges that the world is globally is facing. Next slide. So this is the reason why, because of the increasing cooling demand, there is also an increasing demand for air conditioners, and particularly the room air conditioners. And if we look at the statistics, globally, the number of room air conditioners are estimated to be close to 4.5 billion units by 2050. In fact, 67% of households across the globe will own air conditioners by this year, 2050. And most of three-fourths of this demand will actually come from the emerging economies where there is rapid urbanization and where there is also increase in the disposable income. And if we look at just the statistics in India, there is an annual growth rate of air conditioners to around 10 to 15% per year. In fact, India's cooling related energy demand from just room air conditioners is likely to increase 20 times from 94 terawatt hours in 2016 to almost 1900 terawatt hours in 2050. So that is just depicting the growing demand for room air conditioners in this part of the world. If we just go see how public procurement happens in India, in fact, 20 to 22% of the GDP in India is through public procurement. And public procurement occurs at three levels: one at the federal level, second at the subnational state level, and third is at the city municipal level. And the government normally buys from a single source, which is a online public platform, which is called the government e-marketplace, through which most of the public agencies in India buy their most of their procure their goods from this platform. And these are some, I won't go through all the policy instruments that are there, but some of these, like the general financial rules. Then there is also this order for Make in India, which through which public procurement happens, and also the public procurement policy, which favors the micro and the small enterprises. So these are just some of the policy drivers in India, or certain mechanisms through which public procurement happens. So what we did was, in 2019, we partnered with UNEP and initiated this sustainable public procurement discussion. And UNEP happens to be a member of the task force in India, which the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, has set up for sustainable public procurement. And we partnered with them for providing technical assistance to UNEP and the Ministry of Finance on this sustainable public procurement, and that's when the whole discussion started. Then we moved on to doing a prioritization study for sustainable public procurement framework based on the European Union Global Procurement Practice Framework, and developed the preliminary criteria. This was around July, August in 2019. And then 1 month later, we conducted a stakeholder workshop on LCA for public procurement. So I won't go through all the steps, but just to kind of give you a flavor of this entire process, was a very consultative process, where we got the feedback from the industry, from the government departments, both at the national and the subnational level, from the private sector, as well as think tanks, while we were developing this sustainable public procurement guidelines and framework and doing prioritization studies. And then finally, in November 19, we prepared a sustainable public procurement criteria and specifications for air conditioners. So air conditioners actually stood out as one of the major priority products for which the market was also ready to be incorporated as part of the SPP framework as a priority product. And then we went to the stakeholders for their comments. And then from July to September 2020, we worked with the government e-marketplace to institutionalize this framework and develop green room air conditioner specifications. And then finally, once we did that, we did go back to the industry and the experts for a final consultation process. And on 5th of June, the World Environment Day, we finally launched the green room air conditioners on government e-marketplace. So this was the first green air conditioner that was introduced in the government procurement system, and just within 6 months of its launch on the GEMS portal, uh, more than 12,000 green air conditioners were sold through this platform. They were purchased by the public agencies, and this was almost 60% of the total sales that happens in the air conditioning sector through GEMS. So that was a phenomenal success. We thought came through in this new category of green air conditioners that was introduced in the public procurement system. Next slide. So Nidhi, would you like to now take us through the procurement criteria?
Thank you, Apurva, and thank you very much, the Asia Pacific GPP network, especially Sophie and Fareed, for this opportunity. I am taking ahead from Apurva. I'll briefly cover the criteria developed for the room air conditioners. Specifically, we started off with the split air conditioners. So at the onset, SPP specifications were based on a life cycle approach. Key environmental impacts across all the stages, different stages of the room air conditioner were studied, and a corresponding SPP approach was identified. So, for example, in the manufacturing phase, to address finite resources and pollution, the SPP criteria considered recycled materials, or considered following relevant and existing environmental protection and regulations. In case of room air conditioners and also many cooling products, we know that 80% of the environmental impacts are during the operational or the use phase. So here the SPP approach spoke about improving energy efficiency to reduce the CO2 emissions and use of refrigerants with low GWP. And at the end of the life stage, disposal becomes a major issue. And here again, the SPP criteria considered manufacturers that follow sustainable end of life practices. Now, conventional procurement system is quite linear. In this process, the first and foremost is determining the requirement, and usually functional related requirements. Those things are defined. Then you have the tender being floated. Then there's a technical evaluation based on mainly the functional requirements, and then you finally select a product, based on the least cost, right? In a sustainable tendering process, you introduce 3 additional items. One is the sustainable criteria. Second is life cycle assessment, and financial evaluation based on either life cycle cost or or at the very least the total cost of ownership. Now there is a difference between the life cycle cost and total cost of ownership. Life cycle cost, which when Miquel considered, is a little bit more comprehensive, and it covers certain environmental and social impacts as well. So in a sustainable public procurement system, what happens is the technical evaluation includes the sustainability criteria based on the life cycle assessment, and we redefine what is the financial evaluation to consider the total cost of ownership. So that's something that shifts, or that's something that's changed. We adapted for India the UNEP SPP framework. And for each stage across, right from identification of need, definition of specification, selection of the manufacturing companies, award, contract, monitoring, criterias were bucketed under 3 heads. One was the conventional, then you have the core criteria, and the comprehensive. So conventional was basically the business as usual, which considered, included the functional requirements. Core focused on the key environmental aspects, which are the must-to-dos in terms of the product. And the comprehensive criteria looked at higher aspirations of environmental and social performance. So if we look at, say, considering for the room air conditioners, the first thing would be to identify need. And now whether we are looking at need as a product or need as a service, like in terms of cooling as a service. Here we specified the requirements in terms of, quantity, type, everything. What is important to note is one of the shifts that we did was we specified variable and inverter-based air conditioners instead of fixed speed air conditioners. So this was one of the things which was considered right upfront. Second is, technical and performance specifications related to product criteria were specified: safety, performance, product noise, energy performance, refrigerant type in terms of global warming potential, ozone depletion potential, recycle content in packaging, paint specification. So that was under, the technical definition of specifications. Companies were recommended to be selected based on the organization criteria, such as whether they are adhering to certain laws and regulations which are prevalent in India, and social criteria such as employee health and well-being. The contract was recommended to be awarded based on total cost of ownership, as at a start. And once we see our markets mature to get life cycle based assessments available, this could then be transitioned into life cycle climate performance evaluation. In terms of contracting, we looked at green clauses for safe disposal, and such as buyback or take back. They were included upfront in the initial stage itself. So you can see here an example of like doing a total cost of ownership of 1.5 TR room air conditioner. And the green public procurement criteria were formulated based on this calculation. So which accounted for the costs right from initial, operating, maintenance, end of life, right? And what the TCO calculation suggested was that the green room air conditioner was in fact cheaper than the highest star rated product available in India, and it contributed to lesser GHG over a period of lifetime. These are some of the specifications, like a snapshot of the green room air conditioner specifications. I'd like just to highlight again a few, like the variable speed was something which was considered. The ISEER, which Miquel adhered to, that's the seasonal energy efficient ratio, depending on the different capacities. Here was 5.4 and 5.8. At that time, the maximum star rated available, the most high efficient available was at 4.5. Refrigerant to have 0 ODP and based and a GWP not exceeding 700. So all of this was done through understanding of the market, and we realized that the industry, in fact, was way ahead, and they wanted to push these, and they encouraged to get these specifications, adopt these specifications at the get-go, which made it possible to integrate this into the public procurement system. Apurva mentioned these were launched on the government e-marketplace, and this green room air conditioner integration within the public procurement system has actually enabled, is working like a catalyst, you could say, for the market transformation towards moving it to sustainable cooling. Now, besides starting off with split room air conditioner, we are now seeing the other types of air conditioners, the window types. They also are adopting higher specifications on the GEM marketplace. It's just a recap of the specifications again. I can move ahead. I'm also happy to inform you that, very early this year, we released a white paper, which is Advancing Green Cooling Through Sustainable Public Procurement. This white paper considers a lot of case studies and examples, both from the building sector as well as the cooling sector. And this is now available on the public domain, and the link will be there in the presentation that you have. Thank you for the time, and we are happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, dear Nidhi and dear Ms. Chaturvedi, for this very interesting presentation. We will take questions after the third presentation. So I would like now to please invite Ms. Denise Andres from GIZ to take the floor. And Nidhi, if you could also share the link to the white paper through the chat, that would be very much appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you. So Denise, the floor is now yours. If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Let me just beam my presentation and maybe also show myself.
Thank you, Denise. I confirm that we can see your presentation very well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you, especially to Asia Pacific GPP Network for also inviting us to present here today, looking at the results already from U4E and also from USAID just now. We're very happy to see exciting results already. And what we would like to talk about today is how we also want to use GPP in the uptake of green cooling technologies. So in comparison maybe to the two other presentations, we're quite at the beginning. So we're also really happy to get some experience from you today and feedback. Yes. First of all, let me introduce the Green Cooling Initiative. Basically, this is a global project that aims to promote green cooling approach to reduce all the harmful greenhouse gas emissions, which have also already been covered by the colleagues beforehand extensively. Specifically for us, green cooling would mean combining the use of natural refrigerants instead of conventional refrigerants. So that would cover, for example, hydrocarbons for us for split ACs or R290. Yes, so combining that natural refrigerant approach with increased energy efficiency. This project started in August of last year and is running until 2024. As a global project, it's basically working with 7 partner countries, and the idea is to work with each partner country on the individual challenges that they have in their cooling sector on their way to green cooling transformation, or basically transforming their cooling sector into more climate friendly and energy efficient practices. Today, we focus specifically on Thailand. In Thailand, the focus area of our work is basically supporting the end user uptake of green cooling technologies. So basically, Thailand is also an important production hub for cooling equipment here in the region, and in our previous project here as well, we've managed to work together with manufacturers so that basically there is also an existing base of possible production facilities for green cooling technologies. And what we would like to focus now is on this end user uptake. And for us, we have 4 main working streams that we see in order to achieve this goal. One would be demonstrating green cooling technologies. So especially in technologies where it's not yet widely disseminated or not yet widely available in the market. Second, we have supporting market dissemination activities, which are ongoing through our partners as well, such as EGAT, who I believe is also with us today here. Basically, they will have their own funding mechanism called the Cooling Innovation Fund, which also would help to promote market dissemination of green cooling technologies. The third area of our work would be promoting sustainability of trainings as well as skill development for technicians, basically by encouraging or promoting certification and licensing schemes for technicians. So we are aware that safety tends to be one of the concerns when we talk about green cooling technologies, but I think in general anyway, new technologies that are coming to the market, this tends to be a concern. The final area that we have would be to strengthen the green cooling community, basically through the technical evidence and experience that we gather by sharing that to the network and also empowering other actors here to share their experiences. We hope to strengthen this green cooling community. Thailand for the Green Cooling Initiative is also functioning as the regional hub, meaning it will create or initiate platform for exchanges when it comes to strengthening the green cooling community and market. So that could be supplying more or providing more transparent information on current market and supply chain networks for green cooling technologies, as well as providing more information on current standards or, for example, product safety standards, but as well as collating and exchanging experience on the qualification of technicians and how their competence is being sustainably enhanced, basically. After this webinar, I'm also happy to share the website of Green Cooling Initiative. As you can see, it's already in its third phase, meaning there has been a lot of work already that has been done. And the website itself is already hosting a lot of technical information, but also policy information when it comes to green cooling. GCI is also an exchange platform for institutions, but also companies who, for example, are offering green cooling solutions. Going back to Thailand, what you can see here basically are, I would like to point out the two different approaches we have when it comes to supporting the end user uptake of green cooling technologies. Basically here we have different approaches for different markets because of the different levels of readiness within the market. So here we are looking specifically at the commercial refrigeration market and the air conditioning market. For the commercial refrigeration market, we see, for example, that there is more acceptance already for cooling technologies that use natural refrigerants. They are also, in terms of production, already more available. Whereas for the air conditioning market, here we see that the acceptance is lower, and therefore we think that the demonstration of their use would be beneficial to stimulate the market. And what we are talking about here today is basically how we think or how we want to use GPP basically in enhancing or in supporting the enhancement of uptake of green cooling technologies. I think we all come here today with the belief or with the conviction that public procurement enhances demand for green products and that we should use it. Of course, it can only enhance demand when the circumstances are right. So let's look at the circumstances, for example, in Thailand. As I mentioned before, we would be specifically focusing on green cooling ACs, specifically ACs that would use R290 as a refrigerant. So such ACs have already been prototyped here in Thailand, and we've also already used them for training purposes, for example. One, in terms of regulations. So I'm really also happy to have seen the presentations from U4E and US8 beforehand, because the regulations in the country, of course, is one of the essential factors that we look at in the very beginning. So here, for example, in terms of product safety standards, which was also mentioned before, the national product safety standards that apply to ACs here in Thailand and also specifically address R290 already as a refrigerant. It has only been adopted recently and will become mandatory for the country basically beginning in June 2022. We see this especially as a sign that it is also ready to take on the demonstration for ACs and also promote wide use, because basically this mandatory standards becoming mandatory also means that R290 ACs would be available to be sold on the market, provided that they receive the certificate for these safety standards. So for us, in terms of demonstrating the green ACs, what we hope to show is their normal use or their use in normal settings. 2, that the application of standards can equate, of course, to safety. 3rd, such demonstrations, of course, also allow us to work in a controlled environment in the beginning, where basically installation and maintenance can be done by the manufacturer and servicing company, and we can ensure that they have the proper training to handle them. And now we would like to connect basically demonstrating such green ACs using GPP. Why we would like to do this is because normally in such institutions, there is a specific division or facility management that handles installation and maintenance, be it in-house or outsourced, meaning that allows kind of like a central focal point for technical questions, but also safety questions. Second, using GPP would allow us not only to demonstrate the green ACs, but demonstrate also contract modalities for bigger purchase when it comes to green ACs, and therefore also business-to-business contract modalities. For these reasons, we think that the replicability for other government or also semi-public institutions, but also private institutions who want to procure in bigger amounts, we think that here the replicability and the applicability would be high. Finally, of course, when it comes to a monitoring and evaluation system, such a demonstration project would basically allow us to more easily set up such a system and track the impact. And now, so we go from basically demonstration to creating a blueprint. Similar also to what our previous presenters have mentioned here already. Creating such a blueprint for us would, for example, generate some standard technical specifications, both for procurement, but also for use, as well as would allow us to develop GPP documents and guidelines that are specifically generated along the example of an institution, and basically also providing support in looking at their general GPP policies, strategies, as well as action planning, and again, installing such a monitoring and evaluation system to really focus on tracking the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, of course, coming up with procurement guidelines and trainings, which could be useful not only for the institutions, but for the others. So I think probably, or not probably, so I think we talk about 3 different steps. Here we have the demonstration, and by demonstrating with an institution using GPP, we would like to create a blueprint for GPP for ACs that can also be used by other institutions here in Thailand. But second, can also show which kind of specifications, for example, for green ACs can also be used in further GPP processes. And here in Thailand, we hope to do this together with another project, which I'm also representing today, called the Scaling Sustainable Consumption and Production, which basically through SCP also aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this project would focus specifically on what we call impactful products, for example, cooling, but also information and communication technologies, as well as potentially construction and data centers. This project just started this year and is running also until 2024. We are lucky that this project is also working in Thailand, and therefore we can create the synergy. In addition to Thailand, this project is also working with Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And in terms of, let me also just quickly talk a little bit about this project before I leave you guys. So in order to enhance basically SCP in the individual countries, it would focus on improving institutional and technical capacity. So that means those that could help, for example, our partner criteria in improving or updating or coming up with new criteria for their SPP, but also for their eco-labels. And this pilot project, for example, would come specifically under the next activity, which would be to increase the scope of sustainable procurement. We think that through such a blueprint or pilot demonstration, that it allows us to also work together with other institutions by also talking to them how we can make a blueprint or how we can turn that experience into a blueprint that they can use. Finally, of course, the project is also there in order to promote and exchange cooperation on environmental labels and SPP. We also just this week started also a dialogue series regarding sustainable consumption and production, and I will also send that link in the chat box after I present, so that you can also have a look and also participate. One thing that we would also like to be able to initiate is, for example, today, I think we are talking about different experiences already when it comes to criteria for SPP for cooling. We would like to initiate regional discussions as well on a common understanding of what is ambitious product criteria for SPP, specifically for cooling, but also perhaps for other products, and to have a regional understanding of that. Yes, and with this, I would like to end my presentation and also welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, dear Denise, for your presentation. The floor is now open to questions, and I believe we had 2 questions directed to Nidhi, which are quite important aspects. So if you could please, Nidhi, elaborate a little bit on the answers that you have provided through the chat. We had a first question from Mr. Kai Hoffman of GIZ. Has India or any other country experience with cooling as a service or energy performance contracting in SPP? Nidhi, if you could please unmute yourself. Okay.
I'm not in SPP, at least for India, at least that's what I can speak of. But like I wrote to Kai as well, I mean, I'm happy to check that. We do have, I mean, I'm sure there are pilots of cooling as a service being adopted. And there are certain public agencies now, you know, who are looking at energy performance contracting. So there are public procurement agencies, but not like at the GEM platform, which was product based. So they are looking at engaging with ESCOs to look at building energy efficiency, retrofits, and things of that sort. So we are seeing that shift happen, but it is not really there as a centralized thing within the center. Like I said, you know, we have 3 levels of procurement at the center, at the state, at the municipal. So there are bits and bits, but not right now that I'm aware of. And the second question from Manoj was on the price difference between a green room air conditioner and the conventional. What we did was we in fact compared the green room air conditioner to the highest rated, the Bureau of Energy Star labeled product in India. And that's when we saw that, you know, most of the products were within the same range. And even if there was a specific product, because, you know, these kind of higher end products with high specifications also come with inbuilt other control systems and other aspects which make certain products expensive, you know. So they are smart, they are moving towards that direction. And in that case too, what we noticed was, you know, within, there could be a payback within a period of a year. What we have also seen, which I must add, is that we are seeing a shift move already between the purchasers from fixed to variable. We are already seeing the shift which is happening towards higher rated products, and that was one of the reasons why we chose to compare one of the higher ones, you know. So yeah, I hope I've answered that, Manoj. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. Of course, we'll be happy to share a few examples of the implementation of cooling as a service after the webinar by email.
Yes.
Thank you. So maybe I will also ask my colleague Miquel if he has anything to add about this. And if not, we'll see if we have other questions coming in. Miquel, if you could please unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry, which is the question exactly for?
So it was whether there are any other country experience with cooling as a service or energy performance contracting in SPP. But as I mentioned, we'll be happy to share any examples after the webinar has ended.
Yeah, I don't have any specific example now, but maybe I will look for and share with you so you can share with the others also.
Okay, thank you. And then, of course, I see that Soledad has her hand raised.
Just to add a little bit more on the topic of cooling as a service, we do have some examples in the Caribbean with projects on cooling as a service, especially for the area of hotels, tourism. So this is a very important business for this region, and air conditioners is key. So you can check for more information in our website, and also it can be applied in the public procurement system, let's say. It depends a lot on the contract because it's a different business model. You don't focus so much on the product. It's just the sale of the service directly. But depending on the contract, you can still ask for some requirements of the products that will be installed. Again, it depends on the contract. But we have some examples both for lighting and cooling in our website, and I have just pasted the link here on the chat.
Thank you, Soledad. I see that Denise also had a question to Nidhi. So please, Denise, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, basically, I just wanted to know, like, through these efforts, if there's been like a noticeable increase as well in the supply of or availability of green ACs, specifically for the local market as well.
Yeah, so the idea was to basically get it into the GEM platform, the government e-marketplace platform, that as a first step. So obviously then, you know, once it's there, it's also already available in the consumer market. So one of the things that we noticed was these specifications actually were encouraged by the industry because they were already moving in that direction, you know. So that helped. In fact, I would say that the green air conditioners were already there. But in the government e-marketplace or with the government supply, it wasn't as noticeable, you know, or it wasn't, I mean, there were other options available. Now, having done that shift and saying that, okay, now only procure this, you know, that change has definitely happened. And like Apurva mentioned, you know, typically in an annual year, we would see 44,000, 44 grand of air conditioners procured through that platform, which were regular. And since June till now, we have been able to see up to more than 15,000. So, you can see you're already reaching nearly 50%, right? And and the summer season is yet to hit in. So there will be more sales during this period of time. And so we are seeing it's getting documented, I could say, for the first time also. And it would be great to see the year-on-year shift and the change, because the first step is to create awareness and be able to document it. Yeah.
Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you very much. I see that we also had another question from Kai, so maybe I will let him unmute himself. In a minute. Okay, no, he's not available. That's fine then.
Yes, thank you very much. For me, the question would be common core criteria development in the ASEAN region for ACs, eco-labeling, and then using these for green public procurement. Has there been any experience on basically developing common criteria for ACs in the region, or has U4E had any experience on this? I know that you have done these energy efficiency calculation or measuring criteria, but have you gone also into the actual product criteria?
Thank you. Well, Sole maybe knows better than me the projects that are going on with U4E. So maybe Sole, if there is some application of the SPP, even though they have been published recently, yet the guidelines were published like 1 year ago or something like that. But maybe Sole, if there are any efforts of harmonization between different countries in the region to apply guidelines on public procurement.
Yes, I was thinking about this. We don't have any examples at the moment on the application or the harmonization of SPP criteria in Asia, but we are working in the region with the harmonization of product registration system, which is, of course, a different thing. It's this system like Nidhi mentioned, like a platform in which countries can have all the information of the products that are available in their markets. And the Asian region is working on this to have one single system harmonized for all the countries. So we did have the experience on that work that was very successful, but we haven't implemented this on the SPP topic. So yes, this is upcoming, hopefully.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Sorry, no, I was just going to add that, for example, the tool that I presented, it can be used by the countries. I mean, as we saw, depending on the regulation of each country, there might be different specifications, right? And for example, as Nidhi commented, the award criteria in India is to calculate the life cycle cost of the product. And this can be done with this tool. So with this tool, you can set up the parameters that the country wants, and then you just put the information about the appliance you are going to buy, and then or the different bits you have, and then you get this life cycle cost analysis, and then you can decide which are going to select for that. And you also have environmental criteria included in these calculations also. So that's just to remember about this, how useful can be this tool for for the green public procurement. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miquel. Dana, I believe that we are close to our webinar end, so I would like to thank all our speakers for those interesting presentations, and I would like to remind our attendees that, of course, all the relevant material which has been mentioned during the webinar will be shared with you, and that the webinar recording will also be available on our YouTube channel, for which I already sent a link through the chat box. And if you are not yet part of the webinar, I would like also to encourage you to formally submit an application through the link that I will share now. Now, thank you very much. Thanks a lot to all speakers again and to all the attendees. And we'll see you soon on the occasion of another webinar. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.